Why did you feel you had to lie on your police report?
I thought it would be a better explanation under the circumstances.
What you're really saying is that you didn't want to go on record admitting that you believed in Boggs. The Bureau would expect something like that from Spooky Mulder, but not Dana Scully.
Hello, and welcome to Discovering the X-Files, the podcast in which a newbie, that's me, takes a deep dive into the entirety of Chris Carter's creepy universe, as longtime fans escort me on the journey, a journey filled with paranoid conspiracies and monsters of the week. I'm Erix Antoine, and today I'm once again sitting down with the Director Club's Jim Laczkowski. It's a pleasure to have him, and we will be discussing Beyond the Sea, which originally aired in the U.S. on January 7th, 1994. It was written by Glenn Morgan and James Wong, and directed by David Nutter. In this episode, Scully's father dies. Shortly afterwards, she and Mulder are put on the case to find a serial killer and rescue a kidnapping victim, which has them come into contact with death row prisoner Luther Lee Boggs, at which point Scully's skepticism is put to the test when he exhibits psychic powers and the ability to apparently commune with the dead. Brad Dourif is this week's guest star, and Don Davis makes his first appearance as Captain William Scully in this very dramatic Monster of the Week episode. After the break, Jim and I are going to get into it. Stick around.
I know what you want, and I know who you want to talk to. Why don't you just go ahead and ask me?
I'll believe you if you let me talk to him.
No! Nobody talks to anybody until I get a deal. Don't underestimate my fear of dying, and don't downplay my terror going back to that chair. I know my hell's gonna be going back to that chair over and over again for all the time, but in this life, my one and only life, I don't ever want to go back again, ever!
Yeah, so this was a really good episode, Jim. We are talking about another winner here, I think. You had seen it before, correct? And so obviously, I mean, it had been a while since you'd seen it, but you just recently revisited it now, and you were floored by it. Let's start.
Yeah, it's good to be back for yet another sort of movie-inspired episode. That it surprised me mainly because the first time I'd seen this, it was probably with my dad. Because I think he was a fan overall of the show. There were certain episodes that I think he liked more than others, like most people. But watching it now, unfortunately, I've since lost my dad, and anything that has to do with the loss of a parent adds an extra emotional weight behind it for me. Whenever I see something like that, and I had completely forgotten that's kind of what kicks off the whole episode. My only memories of it, of course, are of Brad Dourif being the incredible actor that he can be. Basically, like, the reason why I love Exorcist 3 so much is partially due to his incredible work in that film.
Yes.
So anytime he's basically incarcerated, he does some of his best work in general. So, but again, like, when we start off this episode, I was like, oh man, I completely forgot this is it basically starts with Scully losing her father, and that's pretty heavy. It's pretty heavy, and I think that they wanted to give Scully more, and it's clear because, man, Mulder sits out kind of half this episode. They wanted to give her more depth and more of an arc, and so people could sympathize with her more, because a lot of people kind of wrote her off at the beginning as being just I don't want to use the word bitchy, but certainly just not as she's not the believer. And
Right.
so for this episode to have that challenged so directly, I think gave her more dimension. And this is essentially her story as much as it is about the psychic transmissions that Brad Dourif has. So it's got this incredible balance of like Silence of the Lambs, like dynamics between Scully and what's his serial killer's name again? I forgot his name.
Luther Lee Boggs.
That's right, Boggs. Okay. And obviously the the serial killer that they're trying to find has a very clever name with Lucas Henry. I was like, oh come on, how much more obvious can you get?
Yes. Well, I mean, maybe this might be a little insider baseball. We should throw that out there. So the names of both of them, because they're both serial killers. So you've got the one who's in jail, Dourif, Luther Lee Boggs, and then you've got the one that they're chasing, who's Lucas Henry. And there was an actual serial killer named Henry Lee Lucas, who inspired, in fact, the famous film Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, the very disturbing film Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. So that's what that is. And yes, very, very good points. No, I think it's got a very powerful. It opens in a very powerful way. You have a very powerful cold open, which seems a bit. Because, okay, one thing I wanted to point out, this is not a mythology episode, quote unquote. It's not connected to the alien conspiracy. But what this episode sort of allowed me to see is that the X-Files episodes tend to be categorized just by just in two categories. Just you have your mythology episodes and you have your Monster of the Week episodes, and then you have those camps. But I think people tend to write off that even if it's not a mythology episode, in this particular case, it may not be a mythology episode, but I think it is essential because it is so much about character and character exploration and character depth. It gives us the backstory. It gives us some of Scully's backstory. It is an essential episode. I mean, it's one of those things where if you're doing, let's say, a summarized watch through of the series, you can't skip this one. First of all, because it's excellent, but beyond it being an excellent episode, it's an important episode in terms of the growth of the characters. And so this opens with, Scully losing her dad in a very poignant, sad moment. And then the entire episode then goes on to really explore Scully's character in providing an acting showcase for Gillian Anderson, I think. She's fantastic in this episode, just fantastic.
I wondered if because I guess I didn't try to look it up or anything, but do you know what her father is saying when he almost shows up as a apparition in the chair? Like, I wonder if there's any theories onto what the message he's delivering to her.
No, I didn't look it up, and I honestly don't know. And one thing, I'm not sure. Maybe eventually it's revealed in a future episode. I don't know. But since I'm going through this as a sort of newbie, I'm trying to avoid certain spoilers just to sort of maintain a sense of surprise for myself. So I deliberately didn't look it up. But at the same time, just from the sense of the episode, I don't know if it matters. I think it's a little bit like Lost in Translation, where you have all these theories about what does Bill Murray whisper to Scarlett Johansson's ear at the end, and I think when people obsess on that, they're sort of missing the point. Like what the specifics of what he says aren't really what matters. And I think that's kind of the case here. You have Scully sort of her doubt has always been, was her dad proud of her because she had chosen a career path that was not what her parents wanted for her, and so she's always carried that sort of burden of, she went into the FBI and maybe her dad didn't approve of that. And so she just wants to know if her dad was proud of her and that whole thing. And I think that by the end of it, where she, in fact, chooses not to hear her dad's message, she chooses not to do that because she says, he asks her, what do you think he said? And or how do you know what he said or whatever it is, right? And she goes like, well, he's my father. And so I think what it is that it's more about her looking for closure about it, her looking for a sense of peace. And I think she gets the sense that if, in fact, her father did visit her as an apparition, as like a spiritual apparition at the moment of his death, what he would have been doing there, apart from saying goodbye, of course, would have been sort of to give her that peace, to say, you know, I am proud of you, and I love you, and I'm happy for the path you chose. And so, and I think that's the point. I don't, maybe I'm reading into it, but that's what I think.
No, I think you're right. And also that moment where we don't get to hear what he says, probably because of the actor, made me think of Twin Peaks. I was like, yes. Ooh, there's a little creepy moment there. But obviously, I think it's important for Scully to experience what she experiences in this episode, where it's almost like it's a role reversal, because Mulder actually doesn't believe.
Right. That's and this was apparently that was apparently deliberate. What you were saying, you know, how people were sort of writing off Scully as kind of just like, she's the skeptic and she's stubborn and it's getting kind of annoying because she's seeing all these incredible things every week and she's still hard-nosed about it. So I think it was a way to sort of, okay, but let's give her a moment to sort of come out and let audience members start to empathize with her a little bit more. And so, yes, switching roles here is intriguing, the way that they did it. And how, I mean, you know, Mulder gets, what's the terminology they use nowadays? Mulder gets fridged like halfway through the episode, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a Scully episode essentially, and I think it's the first one, really. It's the first real Scully episode.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
It gives us that, and so she has to take the Mulder role in a sense. She has to be the one that is a believer, but it's not. They do it in a layered way. It's not so much that she's just directly a believer. She's fighting that impulse because deep down inside she's a skeptic. So she's like, I can't believe that I'm getting sucked into this. I can't believe that I'm falling for this. You know, you really see that struggle. Gillian Anderson plays it very well.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's just, I think I like, you know, like a serial killer puzzle kind of a storyline here with when, you know, Boggs like relays certain like decoded messages like beware the white wooden cross or something like that.
Yes.
And then it actually comes into play. I think I just get a kick. Like, I feel like I get like a dopamine burst in my brain when you actually see the white wooden cross. I'm like, yes, of course, you know, or
yes.
You know, don't follow the devil and all that. I kind of, that's really just, I mean, that could be sort of A to B to C kind of writing, but I think it always works in a very satisfying way. And again, like, this could just be, and similar how we talked about the last episode, like, oh yeah, they could have just totally aped and, you know, revised the thing. And here it's like, oh yeah, they could have just totally done something Silence of the Lambs like, but I feel like they give it a twist throughout.
Yes.
And make it interesting and certainly emotional. And that's the kind of the thing that, you know, surprised me the most. I mean, yes, I know this show does go there, but you know, with Gillian Anderson's performance here, when she's, you know, talking to him and, you know, almost breaking down and screaming at him at one point, then tearing up at another, it's got a lot of weight to it. And, you know, like seeing her grief and her rage, and certainly, you know, the very final moment is it's moving. I was like, yeah, this is a creepy episode. Brad Dourif gives one of the best performances maybe of the entire series in terms of a guest spot. But in the end, it turns out to be a really sort of beautiful statement about loss. And that's what resonates for me, at least, especially now. I mean, probably when I first saw it, all I could think about was how creepy it is. And it's definitely that. But man, Gillian Anderson, she should have won an award just for this episode.
Yeah, no, it definitely is a real showcase. And you brought up Brad Dourif, and he's also one of my favorite actors, one of my favorite character actors. He's always good. You know what I mean? Like he can show up in a crap movie, but he's gonna make, like, at least his scenes are gonna be worth sitting through the movie to get through, because he's always going to be interesting. He's always going to, you know, put himself out there for 100%, and he's just interesting to watch. He's one of those actors that's always interesting to watch, no matter what the work is, right? And then obviously in a situation like this, you got a really a really quality television series and a good episode of it, so the whole thing works. And it's funny, you brought up Exorcist 3. And yeah, you're right. I mean, he's playing a slight variation on the character from Exorcist 3, essentially. It's that given kind of a Hannibal Lecter twist, because that's what the trope is. I mean, like this is very much Silence of the Lambs. Ice, which you pointed out, it's the same production team. It was Glenn Morgan and James Wong wrote it. David Nutter directed it, and that's
Yep.
that's a twist on The Thing. This is a twist on Silence of the Lambs, clearly, which is something that was sort of a trope by that point. This is 93, 94. Now, this aired in 94, but it was produced in 93, I guess. And by that point, it was already becoming almost like they were doing that. They were doing that whole, we've got to have a Lecter character in the movie. So this was something that was becoming a trope. It was almost becoming a cliche, but they handle it very well. Here, it works very well with that X-Files twist, the paranormal X-Files twist that they put on it.
Yeah, and they also insert some, social commentary too with just capital punishment. I'd say.
Yes.
And certainly, I always was torn on that because my first exposure to like really being confronted with the inhumanity of that was, Sean Penn's film Dead Man Walking. Actually, it was Tim Robbins. He directed it, I believe. Yeah.
Yes.
And
yes, he did.
yeah, when I saw that kind of like, because I tend to demonize criminals because they do horrible, horrible things, and I'm not saying that I was ever pro death penalty in any way, but at the same time, I think that was the film that made me it confronted me with the fact that yes, they deserve punishment, but I don't think this is the right kind of punishment for them. And certainly we actually experience these moments of humanity with Brad Dourif sort of coming to terms with what he's done, but also just the fact that like the souls of his victims are haunting him
right.
as he's about to go on death row is really striking. And the fact that it's like in black and white, and I think that giving that again some more weight and some more depth behind it also makes you care for this character instead of just immediately going, oh, he's just a creepy psychopath. And
right.
I think that even Gillian Anderson sort of comes to terms with that because she wants to dismiss him, and inevitably she can't because she senses some humanity in him, which is really also something powerful that I feel like they do a lot in this episode, but it all works.
Yes, actually, let's discuss that little element for a minute. I think the humanization of evil, okay, just it will make the story more complex. To have it's one thing to have a cardboard cutout villain and whatever, that can be fun, I suppose, but when there's no depth to it, then what else? In this particular case, you have a man who's clearly a horrible person who's done terrible things, and as you said, he deserves to be punished, no doubt, but he's still a human being. And so what we see here is that like that he has that very interesting line where he basically implies, he says, I know that my hell will be to visit that gas chamber every single day for eternity. But now in this one life, like that, what he's basically saying is, look, I know that I'm going to go to hell. Like I'm that there's no doubt in my mind. And so I'm going to have to suffer that gas chamber, for eternity. But, I don't want to die. I would like to live out my life, at least, even if I'm locked in this cell, I would like to live out my life, right, naturally. And, and he is consciously, what we realize is he is attempting a sort of redemption by helping them out.
Yes.
He's making a deal, obviously. He has something in it for himself, but he is trying to do something good with his gift, right? He is genuinely trying to help them find Lucas Henry and rescue the kidnapped people. So he is genuinely trying to do something redemptive so that, he's accepted that he's going to hell, and the people that he's killed are going to haunt him for eternity, but he does want to do something good with his gift, at least something, to redeem himself to himself, essentially.
And I think Scully recognizes that, and I think that again gives them a really strong bond, even though there's certainly moments of distrust and dismay and anger and all sorts of. That's why I think it like covers such a wide range of feelings for everyone involved. Maybe Mulder sort of, if you want to make a critique, just the fact that he's so much in the background and like relegated to a hospital bed is kind of disappointing, but at the same time, it's not about Mulder, and that is fine by me actually, because
Sure.
Scully deserves what the kind of evolution of character that she gets in this episode, and I think that was their intent anyway. And I think it's just an interesting place to start with Mulder being so dismissive anyway about the fact that like I don't believe that. I believe in psychics, but I don't think I believe in this one in particular.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the other element. The psychic element is kind of, I believe there are other episodes where you'll come across that in different ways, but here it's really, really, really memorable. It's almost like they're taking the kind of multiple personality trope, but applying it in a very different way with, Brad Dourif's transformations into other people, or just like recalling what's happening in the moment to other people. And he's just so good in this.
Yes. Yeah. No, he's excellent, and it's the thing where it is the sort of big acting that when handled improperly can fall into over the topness. You know what I mean? It cannot work. When not done properly, because it's so big that after a while, if it's not carefully calibrated, I do think that it can become over the top and just sort of call attention to itself, and it happens all the time. But Dourif, gifted actor that he is able to just stay on that line. He knows just like how big it needs to be before it's too big. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
yeah,
so,
for sure.
Because he's all the histrionics, he's shaking and hyperventilating and all that stuff. And apparently, when preparing for the scenes, he would work himself up, and when practicing for it, he actually, his face turned purple. That's what I saw, behind the scenes detail. So I mean, he was really getting all worked up into it, right, to get himself into that sort of fervor. But that's the thing. I mean, he manages to pull it off without making it laughable, without it becoming too theatrical. It's just on the line where it needs to be, and it works for the episode, for the intensity that they're going for. It's truly great. I mean, I have no criticisms to say about that at all.
That final moment, between Mulder and Scully, I think is really moving without even necessarily bringing tears into the picture. It's just like you're saying about, her just sort of learning to accept what her father, the relationship of her father, and the fact that they had something, and she just knows deep down that he was proud of her. That's just a really nice, profound, poignant moment between two people again. Like, I love that they find those moments of humanity between Mulder and Scully. Like, it's clear that they have a connection, and it's really strong, and they want to be there for one another. And it's just it becomes a lot. It becomes really a statement about a grief too in the end, and just how you have to move forward from it, but also just sort of accept that it's always going to be with you. I think, because it doesn't go anywhere. That's the thing about grief. It doesn't. It's not like something that you can necessarily heal. It's just with you for all time. And I think that certainly the image of those ghosts, even as he's walking down death row, it's like, yeah, that's true. It's like, I don't know if they're literal manifestations or not, but in his mind, yeah, they're always going to be with him. And who knows where he's going to go, probably to hell, especially since he was a horrible person. But at the same time, he sort of comes to terms, I think, with the fact that he's moving on to the next phase of whatever existence he's going to be in. But yeah, again, like, I think you give every character here their own humanity, even if it's just a gesture of, Mulder putting his arm on or his hand on Scully's shoulder at the end. I think it's the little moments like that give it a lot of meaning, and it makes you care about these characters more than just, oh, they're just Mulder and Scully. They're actually human beings, and I love that.
And going back to Luther Lee Lucas, going back to his walk, as he's haunted by the ghosts, because he describes this to Scully as happening the first time, right? That they tried when he got the stay of execution, when supposedly that's when he acquired the gift. So now we see that it's happening again, right? But you mentioned earlier how this sort of does the social commentary. It does sort of comment on the idea of capital punishment. And this is obviously, I mean, this whole sequence of his execution, the way they play that out, it's kind of excruciating. You know, you are experiencing that idea of this person who's going to a room where they're going to kill him. Essentially, you know that you're about to die, right, at that moment, and the whole process of it, you know, and he's getting strapped to the chair, and the way they show putting the powder into the, for the cyanide powder or whatever it is. That whole scene is done in a way really to comment on the horror of capital punishment. And here's the thing, like in the episode itself, we see that as a concept, Mulder and Scully don't care. They feel he's getting what he deserves, right?
Yeah.
Certainly early on, you know, and even when Scully feels that she was duped, you know, and Mulder's in the hospital, she unloads on him, and she's all like, if he dies, believe me, I'm gonna, I hope I get to pull the switch myself, that kind of thing, right? And that's the reality of capital punishment. It's like because when people want to advocate for it, they'll always pull out the argument, well, how would you feel if some psychopath murdered a loved one? And and the answer is, well, obviously I'd feel terrible. Obviously I would want that person to pay, and probably I'd want to kill them myself, right?
It's why revenge stories are always going to be with us.
Right, right. But capital punishment is about that. It's like, well, yeah, but should the state do that? I mean, is that really, So that's always the thing, where that's where the balance lies. And I think that this episode definitely, I mean, they were clearly trying to comment on that. We're going, yes, this guy's horrible, and he, you could argue that maybe he deserves to die, but does he really? I mean, is this really what we should do? Is this how it should be? I mean, think about that. Think this person is just being walked down a hallway to his death. It's this excruciating death. He's being walked down a hallway, and that's it. And so, like, it's the sort of thing that makes you think about those things. You talked about, in Dead Man Walking. Also, the Sean Penn character in that film, clearly a terrible man, did a terrible thing, and you could argue maybe he deserves it, but that's the thing about those stories, and it's very compelling that this episode is so layered that it has all of that going on.
I was really kind of angry when I first saw Dead Man Walking, and the fact that it made me cry over a criminal. Once he's talking about how much he regrets and he starts crying, in a way, like that was the first time that ever happened to me, where I was just like, oh, right, I'm empathizing with a criminal and I don't want to. It's like one of those things where you want to separate yourself because, I would never be that way. And clearly that person is evil. Same thing with that Todd Solondz movie, Happiness, and Dylan Baker's character,
yes,
where he plays a pedophile. And I was really mad at that movie too, where I was just like, I don't want to feel this way. That's, yes. I've always put them far, far away from me in every capacity when I know that they can do those horrible things. And so, even here, it's like, Brad Dourif is essentially a horrible person for what he's done. But at the same time, they give him some grace, some humanity, and certainly, like you mentioned earlier, redemption for, actually coming through and doing what he did to ensure that this Lucas Henry character is caught. And it's just a really great, compelling narrative that you get really caught up in. And even if it does a lot, I feel like every single thing that they attempt here from the very beginning feels fully realized. I know that they had some arguments in the writer's room when putting this episode together, but I think that if you were to single out in terms of great writing, as much as I love the Ice episode we covered before, this one's probably even stronger in terms of the script. So yeah,
I would agree with you because it's more layered. I mean, in the case of Ice, it's very derivative of the thing, but here it's a lot more. There's a lot more going on in this episode. I mean, maybe overall, if someone were to ask me which episode I prefer, Maybe I'd say Ice, like Ice might be the more entertaining one, but this
Yeah.
one is certainly much more complex, much more layered. A lot is going on here, and it's all really just really well handled.
Yeah, and it deals with the universal theme, of loss and grief. I mean, obviously we don't all interact with serial killers, but at the same time, I think, like I said, it does a lot even with just that. Like I said, it could have been a really sort of tropey ripoff of something like Silence of the Lambs, but they add an extra layer to it. It's almost like I wonder if they did initially think, what if we combined, the Brad Dourif's character from Exorcist 3 into Silence of the Lambs? Because that's kind of what it is, and I'm happy with that. Even if the episode was just that in more of a fun way, as opposed to just being really deep and emotional, I would have liked that too. It's like you kind of get that to some degree with Brad Dourif, but like as the episode goes on, it does get deeper, and again we get so much more uh, from Scully and what she's going through internally and what she's struggling with, and I think that really adds a lot. And as you see as the seasons go on too, there's just so much complexity between the relationship of Mulder and Scully that makes this really exciting. Like you can certainly just get into each individual episodes, just the plots in themselves, because a lot of them are really clever and really dark and really interesting. But what keeps you coming back is their relationship and these two people, because you have to look forward to spending time with them because they carry the whole
Clearly.
series.
And so to deepen that relationship is very important. I think, I mean, because they do highlight this, they make a point of it early on in the episode, when she goes into the office. He calls her Dana, and I think, I mean, maybe I missed it, but I think it's the first time that he's done that.
I think you're right, and I don't know if he's doing that just because he found out, that she lost her father, and I don't know if there's a reason necessarily that he did that, or if it was just kind of like a Freudian slip or something. But
Yeah.
I think it's just, again, their relationship is definitely evolving.
Yes. No, and I think at that point, I think what it is that he's coming at that moment. He's not coming to her as her partner, her coworker. He's coming to her as a friend, and so that's why it's like I'm not referring to you by your quote unquote terminology. I'm not, we're not Mulder and Scully right now. We're Dana, and Fox, and I'm just coming to you as a friend, showing compassion for what you just went through. So, so that's why I think he calls her Dana because he's like I'm appealing to you directly as a friend, and so that I think it's a very nice moment. It's nicely handled, and so this is a great episode full of great moments. Is there anything that we don't like about it? Was there anything that that you thought was maybe didn't work?
I'm trying to think. Nothing really stood out to me. I mean, I don't necessarily need like the Lucas Henry character to be more memorable because again, it's not about him. He's more in the background. It's not like, oh yeah, we should have seen more of him being creepy and weird and stuff, because I don't know if that was necessary. I think it's just, again, we're sort of following just some random serial killer who, well, I guess we do learn about something that happened to him with some sort of car accident, or he lost his wife or something, and he was like trying to reenact. I think that's where I got a little confused, like what his plan was.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think if I remember correctly, it's his mother and his high school sweetheart, which I don't understand. Was he driving? Like, I don't really know, but there was an accident in which both his mother and his high school sweetheart were killed. I believe his high school sweetheart was decapitated. They make a point of that, of pointing that out. And so I guess that's he's traumatized, and that's what these crimes. It seems like he kidnaps high school sweethearts. That's what he does. He goes like that. That's an interesting, the scene where we see the kidnapping with the two, the couple, the young couple. It's a nice little creepy scene. It works very well.
Reminds me of Zodiac.
Yes, very exactly. And I'm pretty sure, I mean, that they were trying to evoke that to some degree. Clearly, they were trying to evoke the Zodiac killer killings, or the Son of Sam. They were trying to evoke that thing by staging that. And the only thing about that one little bit, though, is that the actor playing Jim, this kind of betrays where this show was shot in Vancouver, and obviously cast locally, because he does, he says sorry. So, that kind of, that sort of jumped out at me a little bit. I always, I just love pointing that out. In watching the first, whenever, I rewatch Family Ties, I always wait, going back and watching, the early seasons. It's always, waiting for Michael J. Fox's Canadian accent to slowly go away. But, in those first few seasons, Alex P. Keaton says sorry a lot. So that's a very, that's just a dumb detail. So I mean, I guess overall, we really don't have any complaints. This really, I guess, is an excellent episode. Yeah.
No, again, you get that writing team. You'll see they've done some of the best episodes of the entire series, and you're gonna find there's more episodes you'll love more than others. But I think, man, I've been blessed to just choose what I think are probably the two best episodes of season 1 so far. I didn't even really plan it. I just remember those were two titles that stuck with me, and those were two titles that I thought, oh man, yeah. When I think of the first season of X-Files, what hooked me was, and that's the thing too, is it starts off strong. How many series where people tell you, oh, you can skip the first season, it doesn't get better until season 3 or something.
A lot of series have that. Yeah, that's true.
But here it starts off really great.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. I mean, Glenn Morgan, James Wong, really good writing team. Interesting thing about that is that, okay, so they're responsible, as you're saying, for some of the show's best episodes as writers. And then they became famous for, being one of the creative forces behind the Final Destination series. But here's the part that's weird to me. They didn't actually write Final Destination.
You're right.
And that it's okay, that's fine. But my point is, if they didn't, I mean, why didn't they? I mean, it's a weird question.
You would think so. I think they might have co-written it.
Maybe.
I think that, the main guy behind it was Jeffrey Reddick.
Right. He wrote the script. He's the credited writer.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe they did some rewrites or something, they touched it up or something, but
I would say they must have. I would think that, because if they are writers, that would just be look, this is a great script, great concept, but we're gonna punch it up and make it better. And they didn't take credit for, maybe they weren't allowed to, the WGA rules and all that. Yeah, so and then David Nutter, the director of the episode, who also directed Ice and has directed several episodes of X-Files that are also very good, as I understand it. He's a very good director. I mean, gives the episode a really cool cinematic scope. It's nicely put together. It's just a good episode, all around. Just everything's great. It's a good creative team. So
yeah, you have a lot to look forward to, for sure.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. So I guess that's it, right? Is there anything else that we haven't discussed?
Not that I can think of, no. I'm very happy with revisiting this episode and continuing to move forward with the show, because it reminds me of what great television can be, and not only is it one of those shows that you want to keep continuing with, it feels like revisiting old friends.
All right, well, thanks for joining me. I'm going to go ahead and let you now do a little plugging, because I really think that I'd like my listeners to know where they can find you and what kind of great stuff they can get from you elsewhere. So go ahead and tell our listeners what they can do.
Well, the main hub, the main place you can go to is nowplayingnetwork.net, because there's links to not just my show, but a bunch of great podcasts from other people that love to nerd out like we do about movies and music and all sorts of pop culture. So go to nowplayingnetwork.net for all of that, including links to my other shows, Voices and Visions, which is a sporadic interview podcast that I try to keep up with, and Directors Club, which is a monthly show where I talk about a particular film director. It's been going on for 10 years, even if we only have 180 episodes. I'm still very proud of the run that we've had, and it's going to try and keep going for at least another year or two. There's so many directors you can cover. We'll have to have you back on again next year for someone else too, for sure.
Oh, I would love to, and I'm going to second that recommendation. Definitely check out that network. But if you only pick one podcast, I would say definitely Directors Club is fantastic. Just great conversations that go on there. And
yeah, and we had a good one on M. Night Shyamalan. I was very happy with that episode. So
yes, that was a fun one. 2.5 hours talking about Shyamalan. Not bad at all.
Good times. Well, thanks again. Appreciate it.
And thank you, Jim. Always a pleasure, and I will definitely have you here soon.
I was considering Boggs. If he knew that I was your partner, he could have found out everything he knew about me, about my father.
Scully.
Beyond the Sea was playing at my parents' wedding. Visions of deceased loved ones are a common psychological phenomena. If he knew that my father had...
Dana, after all you've seen, after all the evidence, why can't you believe?
I'm afraid to believe.
You couldn't face that fear? Even if it meant never knowing what your father wanted to tell you?
But I do know.
How?
He was my father.
And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed our discussion. And if you did, please subscribe to the podcast. Give us a like. Take a minute to write a positive review and go ahead and spread the word on social media. The podcast is available on Anchor FM, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other platforms. Look for the Erix Antoine Network on Facebook or on YouTube. You can also follow me on Twitter at ErixAntoineNet and check out my film reviews on Letterboxd. I would also recommend you follow Jim on Letterboxd at NowPlayingJim, but also please heed his advice and check out nowplaying.net and enjoy a whole bunch of good podcasts, not the least of which is Jim's own Directors Club, which I'm a big fan of. It's been running for about a decade now and always features comprehensive discussions of a particular filmmaker. They cover the gamut from John Frankenheimer to John Ford to Jonathan Demme, from Martin Scorsese to Don Coscarelli. It's good stuff, and I'll be providing helpful links for all this in the episode description. I'm Erix Antoine. I'll be back in a few days when Daniel and I will be discussing Genderbender, which, let's be honest, probably would be seen as a lot more quote-unquote controversial and quote-unquote problematic today than it was 30 years ago, and all because of its provocative title. In any case, I hope you'll join us, and until then, let's all remember that the truth is out there. See you next time.